Okay, we are recording. So, we go with loadRoom. I think I'm going to do a code walkthrough of that. It's been a while. Yeah, I put this at the start of my diagnostic print line statements. Manage audio loading. I believe this method has to do with the radios. It takes a while to load those up, and I don't know, I think this is threaded or something like that. Purge thread, interrupt, new thread. Okay, yeah, I think I created purge threads which clear out the memory of unneeded images and audio. Let's see. Load progress. Yeah, that's what I use to figure out how much of a room has loaded at a time. Yeah, I fire loading threads and purge threads. Last room loaded is this. It's been so long since I've looked at this code that even I don't know exactly what this is doing. But I think that this has to do with some of the dynamic image loading that I have. If you go into commentary mode and jump from one room to another room that's way on the other side of the factory, then there tends to be a bit of a wait while images are loading up. It's these threads, the loading threads, that it's waiting for. Let's see, and I believe here is where I start checking to see whether the images are ready. If they're not ready, then we set the isLoading flag to true, and we check the loading progress here. Let's see. There's a wait start time here. Oh, and since I got a while loop here that continuously calls this .gameDraw, that is essentially the render method which I've been talking about in other videos. And I believe that GameDraw has some code in it that if this isLoading flag is set to true, then it shows the load progress and it shows that loading present with the wisp of energy coming out of it. Paint immediately essentially takes the canvas buffer and paints that onto the front of the J panel. Then I have thread.sleep 100 milliseconds. Let's see. And if we have waited longer than 5 seconds here, that's what 500 milliseconds here, plus wait start time, less than this. If we have waited 5 seconds, then we fire off the loading threads for just this one room. And it just clicked in my head that probably I should have some kind of Boolean that says, yes, we have fired off the loading threads for this room only. Let me just double check to see if we have anything in here. Okay, loading threads, get room name. Okay, good. So if we are loading a thread for this room, or if we do have a loading thread for just this room, then we don't do anything. All this is commented out. That's a relief. Let's see. And if there are any radio sprites going at a given moment, yeah, we're back in the loadRoom method. Any radio sprites that are currently playing audio, those instantly get stopped after we begin loading the, after we start loading the room that the call to this method has asked us to load. Let's see. Set the goal sprite and the boss sprite to null. That's right, there's only one rainbow elemental boss per room. Let me see how much time I've got. 4 minutes, plenty of time. So clear out the bullets and set it to a new array list. Same thing for enemy bullets, fireballs, collected items. Collected items are essentially the little gems that sort of flash upwards after you've grabbed them. fading enemies, those are graphics of enemies that are imploding. Okay, current room, block man. Okay, current room equals the room parameter. The block manager, which is the tile map essentially, gets retrieved from the room. Blocks, same thing, I call them rogue blocks. Background color, I don't remember how background color gets used, but I'm sure we'll see it in the render method. Let's see. Now, where am I getting that from? Player X. Okay, that gets passed into loadRoom as a parameter. Okay. Same thing with the player Y position. Let's see. There's also a list of enemy spawn points. We reinitialize enemies as a new array list and go through all the enemy spawn points, create a new enemy for each spawn point, and basically populate each enemy, and we get all this information about how to populate the enemy out of the enemy spawn point. The position, the X and Y position, its behavior, which can be stationary, which is red, turret, which is essentially the blue enemy, left, right, which is the gray enemy, or pink if we're in gem mode, lightning, which is the yellow enemy, up, down, which is the green enemy, up, down, turret, which is the up, down, turret, which is the purple enemy. It just clicked in my mind that there's no orange enemy, but that would just make it go to the default case here and populate it just the same as if it was stationary or a turret. I'm just going to add another case statement here, enemy sprite dot, I believe it's fireball turret. Yep, that's the one. So that's going to be populating these out-of-the-box enemies that way. Again, enemy sprite, that's for the out-of-the-box enemies which come with the editor. That's not for NPCs that you create that function as enemies. Probably there's going to be a lot more of those types of enemies in the game as I go on. I've got a lot of ideas in my head for what I can do with enemies, but the custom NPC system just has to have more features added to it before they can be used. So temp enemy, prime all images, make good and sure those images are in memory somewhere, and then finally add temp enemy to the enemies array. And then we do something very similar for custom NPCs. Let's see. Shoot. NPC list changed. I don't remember exactly what this is about. I think, okay. That basically lets it know that the NPC speaker list is different. Alright. In the tile map, we prime all the images. And I believe that one of the things that this does is the tile map actually draws one big, huge image, which it continuously uses and continuously draws onto the canvas graphics, or takes a chunk out of it and draws it onto canvas graphics. I believe that's what draw the whole image is all about. Doors, that's how you get from one room to another, obviously. Let me just dive into get all NPCs. I believe, yeah, it's in here that we start to get smaller methods like spawn all custom NPCs. It adds that to this array list of custom NPCs that gets passed back. There's probably some purists who hate me for using array list instead of a list. I don't know. You don't need to be that much of a purist, in my opinion. Let's see, whole foreground. If it's not null, then the current foreground gets set to this. This is the whole image of the tile map that essentially gets cached when you load the room. Background parallax layers. I have these essentially set up as a separate data object that I believe gets called separately as well. Background parallax layers, that comes out of the room data. You can tell room data has a lot of stuff in it. Items, this is basically the same as enemies. We get a list of item spawn points, and based on those item spawn points, we add these items. Once in a while, if we're respawning in a room and if we're respawning in a room that had a checkpoint flag in it, we don't want the checkpoint flag that the player got earlier to spawn at the exact same place where the player spawns. So that's what this should omit checkpoints Boolean is all about. Boss sprite, again, if we're omitting checkpoints, or I should say if this is the room where the boss was killed, then the boss shouldn't spawn here. Again, the boss is the rainbow elemental. And yeah, we have a single boss spawn point. This isn't a list of them. It says where the boss should spawn. It says the flag's spawn point when the boss is killed. There's a few different types of boss, I think about 3 different kinds. There's thin, medium, and thick. Let's see. Foreground widgets and background widgets, that's the animatable foreground and background elements. Comment widgets, those are the widgets that only appear in commentary mode. Make sure that all the widgets have their frames reset to 0 here. The goal sprite, again, there's only one goal per room. The list of radios, we just get that straight from there. If there was any fireball smoke before, we clear that out and just create a new array list, which, as the game progresses, it can be added to as necessary. The hurt zone sprites, those get copied in from the room. And now that we're here, we can say we're done loading. I'm not exactly sure what this does, but apparently it says we're done loading as well if last room loaded is null. I've got this. If any type of error gets thrown, then we catch it here and put out a stack trace of it. So that's pretty much it for the load room walkthrough.